You already know this story. In 1995, a man named MacArthur Wheeler robbed two banks in Pittsburgh with lemon juice smeared on his face. He believed it would make him invisible to the security cameras. He was arrested that night. He was, by every account, stunned. This story has been told in at least a dozen psychology videos. It is the founding myth of the Dunning-Kruger effect. And almost everyone who tells it gets the next part wrong, including possibly every video you've already watched on this topic. Because the graph you picture right now, confidence soaring, then crashing, then slowly climbing back up a mountain of expertise, does not exist in the original research. It was never measured. It was never published. To understand what Dunning and Kruger actually found, and why the popular version of their own discovery has quietly become a textbook example of itself, we have to go back to 1999. David Dunning was a psychology professor. Justin Kruger was his graduate student. Neither of them set out to name a meme. They wanted to answer one specific question. Why do incompetent people so often fail to notice their own incompetence? So they ran 4 studies on Cornell undergraduates: logical reasoning, grammar, humor. In each one, students took a test, then estimated how well they'd done compared to their peers. The students in the bottom quarter of actual scores, the ones who performed worst, ranked themselves, on average, near the 60th percentile. They believed they had beaten most of the room. In reality, they had only beaten about 1 in 10 people in it. That gap between self-belief and actual performance is the real Dunning-Kruger effect, not a curve, not a mountain. A gap, measured in percentiles on a bar chart. This detail matters more than it sounds like it should, because everything that happened to this finding after 1999, the memes, the diagrams, the confident YouTube explainers, is itself a demonstration of the thing it claims to explain. Here's what the original data actually showed in full. It wasn't only the bottom performers who got it wrong. The top performers misjudged themselves too, in the opposite direction. The highest scorers slightly underestimated how well they'd done relative to others. Dunning and Kruger had an explanation for this second half of the finding, and it's the part almost never repeated: the false consensus effect. People who are genuinely skilled assume the test was as easy for everyone else as it was for them. They don't lack confidence in their own answer. They overestimate everyone else's. So the real effect has 2 mirrored halves. The unskilled overrate themselves because they can't see the gap, and the skilled underrate themselves because they assume there is no gap. Neither half of this produced a smooth curve of confidence rising and falling with experience. There was no Mount Stupid, no Valley of Despair. Those names and that shape came later, built by bloggers and illustrators trying to make the findings shareable. Somewhere between the original bar chart and the version that lives in your group chat, someone replaced a percentile comparison with a story about a mountain. And the story was better than the data, so the story won. Which means most people who can confidently describe the Dunning-Kruger effect today are confidently describing a graph that was never measured. Stay with me, because this is where it gets uncomfortable in a different way. It isn't just the popular graph that's shaky. The underlying science has a live, unresolved fight happening inside it. One that almost no explainer video ever mentions, because admitting doubt doesn't perform as well as certainty. Ask yourself this: if poor performers can't recognize their own incompetence, why does the size of their overestimation shrink the moment you give them training? That question is exactly what a growing number of researchers have used to challenge the entire foundation of the effect. Their argument is statistical, not psychological. It's called regression toward the mean. The simple fact that when you measure two imperfectly related things, like skill and self-belief, extreme scores on one side tend to pull toward average on the other, automatically, with no blind spot required. Combine that with something called the better-than-average effect, the well-documented human habit of rating ourselves slightly above the pack at almost everything. And some researchers argue you can reproduce the entire Dunning-Kruger pattern with a random number generator and no incompetence at all. In 2022, a study designed specifically to test the dual burden idea, the theory that the unskilled lack the very skill needed to judge their own skill, found evidence against it. The unskilled weren't worse at judging in general, they were missing information, not missing the mental machinery to use it. A science writer who spent months reviewing this literature went further, arguing the popularized effect may not describe a real psychological phenomenon at all. David Dunning has defended his own research against exactly this critique. So which is it? Is the Dunning-Kruger effect a real window into the human mind, or a statistical illusion wearing a famous name? The honest answer, the one almost no 10-minute video gives you, is that serious credentialed researchers disagree, and the disagreement hasn't been settled. And here's the part that should actually stop you. That uncertainty is not a flaw in this story. It is the story. Every video that tells you, with total confidence, exactly how the Dunning-Kruger effect works, using a mountain graph that was never measured, while skipping the decades of academic argument about whether the effect is even real, is doing the thing. Speaking with certainty that exceeds what the evidence supports. Not because the people making those videos are unintelligent, because confident simplicity travels and careful uncertainty doesn't. The world was told this was a clean, settled law of human psychology. The reality is a contested statistical argument that professional researchers are still actively having in peer-reviewed journals. For 25 years, the gap between those two versions has been almost entirely invisible to the public. Not because anyone hid it, because nobody's incentive was to slow down and mention it. This isn't just an academic footnote. Look at any comment section, any cable news panel, any group chat argument happening right now. The loudest voice in the room is rarely flagging its own uncertainty. And the quiet correction, the actual peer-reviewed nuance, almost never reaches the same audience as the confident headline version did. That's true of immigration statistics, it's true of nutrition advice, it's true of whatever you watched right before this video. Most people will never learn that the graph they picture isn't real, or that the effect itself is disputed by the field that discovered it. Now you can hold both things at once. The finding and the doubt about the finding. You came into this video already knowing the lemon juice story. You're leaving it knowing something almost nobody mentions. The graph was invented, and the science is still being argued. If that gap between what's popular and what's actually proven deserves to be uncovered, help us find the next one. Next time, we go back to a courtroom where a man's overconfidence cost lives, and a defense team that knew exactly how to use it against him.